Hello, this is Michelle at East Avenue Art, and today I'm going to talk about how I created this hummingbird in watercolor. So I was initially inspired by a hummingbird that's been visiting my home, and I put out some hummingbird feeder for it. But I did really want to get some black and blue salvia, which is what they like, and that's what I decided to sort of paint. So I've started with my Etchr sketchbook. This was a collab that they did with Arch's watercolor paper, which is my favorite. So I'm working in cold press paper. I kind of prefer the toothiness, and the great thing about Arches is that it's 100% watercolor. So it's really going to absorb all of the water that I'm, kind of putting in there. So I sketched out a hummingbird prior because it did take me some time to sketch it. And then I decided to put some masking fluid on the hummingbird because I'm going to put like a very flat green wash for the background. And one thing that I thought is really interesting when you're watching the hummingbirds is that their wings are moving so quickly, your eye can't really fully pick them up. So I didn't fill in everywhere on the wings with the masking fluid because I'm really going to use the benefit of watercolor to create this really soft sort of like appearance of the wings being there, but them being in motion. And I'm going to be using sort of the wet into wet technique for that, which I'll show in a minute. So I really only put in the masking fluid where the wing was very close to the body. And I'm going to allow that to dry. And while that's drying, I'm going to draw in the salvia, the black and blue salvia around, which is a plant that hummingbirds apparently really like. I wasn't super organized. This hummingbird just sort of started showing up outside of our sliding glass door, kind of looking at it. I think partly because I read that they're very territorial, so I think that he sort of thought that his reflection was another hummingbird. So I figured, well, while he's coming around, I'll go ahead and get a feeder, which you saw in the video, but I didn't think the feeder was as aesthetically pleasing. So in my imagination, our little hummingbird friend is actually sort of feeding on some of this black and blue salvia that you see me sort of drawing in. Now, at first, I just thought I was only going to have the one sort of strand of it, and that's initially what I drew in. But then as I proceeded with the composition, I felt like it would benefit from having some salvia around underneath as well, because it was kind of, I don't know, missing something as I was painting. So I'm spending some time sort of sketching in this salvia, but I'm going to add some later as well. So I'm going to get my paints activated with my spray bottle there, and I'm going to start with mixing up a nice light green to serve as the background, and also mixing up a little bit of a brown that's going to serve as the wings. And so this is my Mungyo 48 pan set of watercolor paper. Oops, I had a little bit of a drip, but fortunately that is just going to be the same color that I'm painting the background, so no worries there. I'm going to use a sort of a bigger brush, a mop brush, to get everything sort of wet. And of course, I made sure that the art masking fluid was completely dry before I started this process. Otherwise, it wouldn't really work to mask the paper underneath. So I do include in the description underneath the video all of the supplies I use. I also have a link to my Patreon where you can download a traceable of this project, and that way you can do it on your own just by tracing my sketch of the hummingbird into your notebook, and that is free. I don't have any paid tiers of Patreon. It's just a good place for me to put files like traceables, and yeah, so go ahead and check that out, and then you can follow along with the video, which is, I think, helpful. So I wet the paper and then really tried to move very quickly with adding in the green for the background. And I went with like a very sort of flat wash. I wanted it to be sort of consistent. I think if I were going to do this project again, I might have maybe had more variation in the background. But I was really focused at this point while the paper was still wet, painting in the hint of the wings on the hummingbird because I wanted that hummingbird, and there's the far wing is obviously going to be sort of even lighter, and so you could see at some points I'm adding in some watercolor, some of the color, but then I'm also pulling up as well because I don't want it to be too opaque. And this just requires a little bit of experience and feel because, I kind of know this paper and I know my paints, so I know like how opaque it'll dry or not dry, what the opacity will be with it drying. So, um, just that might take some practice, but I just sort of wanted the hint of the wings being there. And the wet into wet allows me, so like doing this while the paper was still wet really allowed me to have the hint of the wings being there. And so it's like kind of that suggestion that they're moving. I wanted to do some black salvia in the background, so I kind of tried that on the side here. So you see I'm mixing up. And I thought, well, while the paper's still wet, this will just sort of look like it's there in the background. But I did not like how that turned out. So I just, I allowed it to stay there, but then I just didn't really continue with that process in the background. So that was just kind of whatever, I thought. So next I mixed up a little bit of a deeper brown, um, so that I could paint the stem of the salvia, and I'm painting obviously around the areas where I would have some of the buds and flowers in front of the stem. And yeah, so I think that kind of adds a little bit of realism to have some of the flowers sort of in front. It gives it a little bit of a 3D look. And here I'm mixing up a little bit of indigo because I thought that like the bud that sort of encases the flowers had a little bit more of a gray blue look to it. So that's what I'm sort of painting there first, at least based on what I saw from looking at black salvia online. And I'm just going to go up the stem, sort of painting that sort of first part of the salvia, the sort of like bud part that the petals come out of. And again, I really hate what I did up in the left hand corner, but the beauty of a sketchbook is it just can kind of be practice, right? It doesn't have to be perfect, and you learn something every time you do it. One thing I wanted to also mention is that the buds get a little bit smaller as you go up the stem of the black salvia, or black and blue salvia, I guess is what it's called. And then I added a few in that I hadn't anticipated having, just because I thought that would look prettier. And then just to add a little bit of visual interest, I kind of pulled up some of the paint while it was still wet, just to kind of lighten things up. And now that I'm ready to go ahead and start painting the hummingbird himself, I'm getting an eraser and then pulling up the masking fluid. Now this can sometimes be a messy process. Definitely wait until all of your background paint is dry because you don't want your eraser to mix in. That would be a little bit of a mess. Um, but yeah, it takes a little bit to get that glue up off of the paper, and then it's sort of, you've gotta, wipe it all up and get it out of there. But you can see it did a great job as far as preserving the white underneath. So I mixed up a really light sort of brown that I'm going to use on the body of the bird. I decided to do one of the red-throated hummingbirds, and there I'm sort of sketching in where that would be. and I sketched in the eye, which is usually about the same on the same line as the beak. And I'm just going in first with that really, really light brown, and I can always build off of that. And you'll see over the next few minutes how I build the wing in to the bird as well. But I'm gonna let that dry first, and then I'm gonna go back to the black and blue salvia. And I kind of mixed up a little bit of blue and a little bit of purple, and then I'm looking at it and I'm just like, gosh, it looks a little too similar to the bud. So I definitely played around with this color. So a lot of times I recommend to just sort of practice with a color on some scrap paper. It's a little bit harder to do that when you're painting over a wash like that green wash, because the green is sort of affecting what the color ultimately looks like. So I just definitely played around with these colors, and I felt like ultimately the salvia was more blue than purple. So there I'm just going directly into that blue that's in my palette, and just sort of applying that blue to the leaves. And that's a well-loved blue. I've used it quite a bit. It's really great for skies as well. So I'm just kind of putting down the first layer of these petals, and it's really interesting how much work I had to do on the petals throughout this process. It actually was where I spent actually the most time, even though the focus of the painting for me is the hummingbird. It actually was more time consuming to do the petals. Um, so I thought that was kind of funny, because maybe I would have been better off doing the bird feeder that's currently what I'm using to attract our little hummingbird friend. Okay, so here is the place where I realized, I think that this composition could use something sort of at the bottom. It's going to be feel very weirdly constructed without, more of the salvia kind of underneath the bird. So that's where I sort of started, painting in more stems, just kind of for the fun of it, and of different sizes. But I was really careful. I didn't want to go behind the bird because I didn't want to mess up what I was going to be trying to do with those wings, which is to show them sort of in motion. So while I gave some time to think about what I wanted to do with that salvia, I decided to go ahead and start on the hummingbird. I wanted to see how he would appear when once I painted him in. So I started with the red of his throat. The one that's visiting me, I don't know if she's a female or what, but she does not, or he does not have the red throat. But I looked at some pictures of hummingbirds, and I felt like, oh, that's really kind of stunning when you can see the red-throated ones. And the one that's visiting me does not stop long enough for me to get a good picture. You can see most of the time when I see him, I don't even have my phone. So while the red paint was wet, I actually went in with black, which I noticed is the color of their head, and I decided to start painting while the red was wet, so that there's like a little bit of a natural progression. I didn't want super hard lines because it's an animal and it just wouldn't look that way. And then I went in sort of with a brown there for with a little bit of yellow for his beak that is in partially in that petal. And then I decided to go in with the green of the bird, and just kind of got a watered down green, a little bit of olive. Those were the colors that I saw in him, from what I can see of similar birds online. And so I thought that was pretty cute. And then I'm trying to soften. I don't want hard lines between like the belly and the wings. So you can see I go in with a little bit of a clean damp brush and soften up. And then I'm going in with a thicker consistency of green just to get sort of like, and I'm just doing like real dabbed in strokes. It's almost like feathers. Um, and I'm trying to kind of give that, appearance that it's the texture is more like a feather. It's not sort of like just a very flat wash or anything. But also, as I'm doing that, I'm just trying to make sure I don't have like super harsh lines between sort of the I guess shoulder area and the underbelly area. And now I'm going in with like a green with a little bit of the brown, and I'm going in showing a little bit of that wing, having the top of it have a little bit of a structure, more of a structure, but then really like blending out into the sort of faded background. So I'm trying to give that appearance of the wings in motion, and then also showing sort of the separation between the wing and the body there as well, which is hard to do. One of the things I noticed, one of my cats was checking out the hummingbird from obviously behind the screen, and we did have the sliding glass door open, so um, he noticed the hummingbird, and actually the hummingbird noticed him, and the hummingbird was sort of like hovering around him. I wish I had this on recording, but it just all happened so fast. But in any case, the hummingbird was checking him out as much as he was checking the hummingbird out, and he just kind of kept going to like different angles and heights to look at my cat, who was just as curious about him and or concerned. And it was really cute to watch that interaction, and also to hear how their wings sound, because they're moving so fast that it just does give that. I understand why they call them hummingbirds. So anyway, I'm getting out my Himi gouache set. This is the 24 set. I got it off of Amazon. These are those jelly gouaches. I'm really new to gouache, so most of the time I use gouache for sort of adding a bit to my watercolor projects. Um, oh, also, and excuse my head for popping in there, but I just wanted to get really close. And I used a fine liner to get that, and there's the fine liner there, to get the eyeballs done because I wanted a little bit of white around the eyeball so that it would stand out, but I also wanted some white within, and I just didn't really trust myself with a brush to do that. um, so anyway, so one of the things too I'll mention about the gouache is I have been using a palette knife to get the gouache out of the palette, because I've read that those Himi Jelly Gouaches can mold if you introduce like spores that can kind of come in from water. So I wasn't super happy with how my salvia was looking once it dried. It just looked really flat, and I think part of it is because the background. So I thought if I go in with gouache, it has a lot more opacity, and I just went in with this really sort of like royal blue, vibrant blue color, and I added that into the the petals just to kind of make that color pop a little bit more and separate out from the background. It was just looking a little bit dull to me. And then I started just playing around with all different kinds of mixes. So I mixed a little bit of white gouache in with that color, and then I mixed a little bit more, and I'm just kind of worked the paint until I was really happy. So I had no plan. It's hard to even sort of describe what I was doing here, because I just sort of was like going by what I liked. I wasn't really sure what color I wanted this to be and how blue versus white I wanted it to get. So I just kind of kept layering on colors until I was happy with the outcome. And so it's hard to explain how I did it because I unfortunately didn't go into this painting with like a really clear plan as it's sort of evolved. But honestly, I gotta say, I'm too much of a perfectionist. And I'm actually a writing teacher at a community college. And I'm always telling students, not to judge their first drafts and not to expect too much. And I feel like when I'm working in my sketchbook, I should sort of apply the same advice. It doesn't have to be perfect. You're learning with each one of the paintings you do. And in fact, I think this painting, I would do it completely differently if I had the opportunity to just sort of redo it, which I mean, I could redo it if I wanted, but I've sort of moved on. But I think I would just, yeah, like maybe do more of sort of like um, a mottled looking background. I wouldn't want the flat wash. I know why I did the flat wash because I was really trying to do something with those wings and make the wings look like they were in motion. And that was like a fun attempt. So I think I didn't want too much going on in the background, so that would be sort of more highlighted. But I think I could have done more of botanicals, sort of the hints of botanicals with the like lower half of the painting. So that some of them were out of focus and some of them, like the ones I'm working on, are in focus. I think that's what I would do differently. So you can see I'm just playing around with the colors, and then I decided to sketch in another um, bit of a branch of salvia so that I could, add a little bit more to that bottom. Just I wanted more of the bird sort of surrounded by that salvia. So, and then I decided to do a little bit of work on his belly and just adding more little dribs and drabs to his coat so he looks more sort of like a bird with feathers. And then I also noticed there was a little bit of black on the red, so you can see I put that in there as well. And now I'm just sort of trying to add things here and there to the bird to make him look like a bird with feathers. And now I'm following the same process as I did before. I'm adding the buds first, and then I'll go ahead and add the petals. I did end up liking just sort of the variety of paint color that I had on those petals and really having some shadows and some highlights. I think that made it look fun. And then sort of went through with I put the dark first. I mean, gouache is sort of interesting that you go from dark to light, or you can go from dark to light in this way that you can't with watercolor, right? And that's because of the opacity of gouache. So then, once I sort of put more colors, I'm just sort of adding highlights, and I just keep playing around with these. And I can definitely overwork the paint. It's really hard to decide when something is done, especially like florals. I feel like florals are just they're tough for me to paint. For sure. I kind of prefer food illustration, but a lot of people like painting florals, so I just always keep working on it. Um, so here I am just sort of like, yeah, playing around with like how much of a highlight do I want? How much do I want like a dark color? So I just really, really overdoing it and overthinking it, but what can I do? And here's the most satisfying part, obviously, is pulling up the paint, or I mean the washi tape, and seeing sort of those clean, nice edges, which look great. Yeah, so if you want the traceable of the hummingbird, you can go ahead and grab that off of my Patreon and, adapt this to however you'd like. And I hope you learned something and enjoyed it. And please like and subscribe. Thanks so much for watching.